Awesome. People are getting on. Fantastic. I'm Dr. Allison Felt. I am owner of Body Motion Physical Therapy. We'll get started here shortly. I guess it's almost exactly 10 o'clock. Does anyone want to drop into the chat and just let us know where you're at postpartum? Are you like how many weeks, or if you've delivered yet, or if you haven't? I can't believe I'm 7 weeks postpartum tomorrow. This is just going way, way too fast, but way too slow. No, I'm just enjoying all the baby cuddles and everything like that. It's just been incredible to do it again. So anyone want to share how far postpartum you are? Just drop it in the chat. If not, that's okay too. You can ask questions as we go. I'm sure lots of stuff will pop up, and I believe you can just do individual messages too if you want to keep it anonymous. And I'm happy to answer those as we go. It'll be fun if it's interactive here. So 3 years, awesome. Birth and postpartum doula, cool. Oh, nice to meet you, Jessica. Awesome, we'll have to get your information. Our clients are always looking for doulas, so I would love to connect with you. And if you ever want to be on our podcast, we'd love to have you on there too. We love to meet new doulas because obviously it's such an individual experience and everyone connects with people differently. So shoot me an email and we would love to connect. Okay, I'm gonna get started here. It looks like we have some people on, and yeah, I'm just enjoying my coffee. My mom just came over to watch the baby while I am doing the webinar. So, oh, hi, Caitlin. I love recognizing the names on here. Nice to see you. Okay, so this webinar is everything postpartum. I just mentioned drop into the chat if you want to know, if you want to share how far postpartum you are. I can't believe I'm 7 weeks tomorrow. It's just, it is really just going too fast. And I want my baby to get chunky because I want her to grow, but then I'm like, oh, don't get bigger. So it's like that whole spot. So, and this time around, somehow I'm sleeping with her, and I hope you are sleeping too. My son is the one that is like constantly up with like nightmares and crying, and he's 4. So yeah, sleep in our house is interrupted because of him more so than her. So funny how that works. Not what you'd expect. But anyways, so this webinar is everything postpartum. We're going to talk about pelvic floor and body healing after kids. And if you have questions, please message me. Please drop it in the chat. I'd love to know where you're located, how far postpartum you are, and we'll go from there. All right. And we're located in downtown Edmonds, Washington, if anyone was interested there. So this many years postpartum, but this infant, yes, totally. Thank you for sharing that. This information is extremely important for everyone across the lifespan. So good to know. If you, I'm just going to side note here. So I had my first postpartum like checkup by Dr. Victoria, and she's on the webinar with us on Monday. And my first 2 children, I didn't have a pelvic floor assessment until way later on. And I just could not, it was just such a reminder. I wrote a book on this stuff, and I still just like need that reminder of how important our core is, how important the pelvic floor is to deal with and treat, and really get back to a good spot before I head back to the gym or head back to, just getting solid on my exercise routine, because it matters. And like addressing all that stuff, the scar tissue, and we'll get into all this, it makes a huge impact on where your organs are even, and where, and what could potentially fall out of your body in a pelvic organ prolapse, not to be scary, but really that's like, we have so much control, and not everybody is given the opportunity to have a pelvic floor assessment or pelvic floor therapy afterwards. And it is, it is the end all be all of like how good your body is going to be through the lifespan. And obviously there's work to do to keep things up, but I can't even tell you, I was just reminded so evidently of why it's so important on Monday. And the quicker you can address scar tissue, obviously the quicker it will resolve. But at any point, you know, through life, hopefully before menopause, but even if not, you can make humongous changes that can prevent you from peeing your pants and doing all that kind of stuff just by treating the pelvic floor and the core as a whole. So we'll get into all that. First, I just want to chat about so thank you for sharing. I want to chat about some common postpartum issues. We'll talk about the core system. We'll talk about the pelvic floor. I'm going to give you guys some breath work to work on, a little bit of a starting point and the importance of why you need to start there. And then we'll talk about how to have a healthy bowel movement. We'll talk about some safe exercises. And then we'll go through some body mechanics and breastfeeding as well. So I'm excited to go through this with you guys. And let's get started. Okay, so I think this is pretty debunked at this point in where we're at, but who knows? So bounce back culture and Kegels are not the answer really to getting your body back postpartum. And, you know, there's a lot of information that says like, that's so toxic, right? And obviously, yes, it's, you know, diet culture and that kind of stuff is toxic because it forces us to want to head back to the gym really hard and hit it and be on a diet so we can get our bodies back. But I would be lying to you if I was telling you that for the last 7 weeks, I haven't been thinking about how can I lose some of this baby weight? How can I like feel my best the quickest? Because that's so real. And there's nothing that's going to change those thoughts for me personally. Hopefully you don't have those thoughts, but most likely a lot of us do. And so really it's about, you know, let's get our core strong and then we can do the activities that we love and that feed our soul that can really help us live these good, active, confident lives. So we're not just, you know, rushing back to kill ourselves on the next diet, even though we might want to sometimes. But, you know, that's not sustainable. And if we're just, what happens a lot of times is rushing back to the gym at 6 weeks postpartum can really have a huge impact on your core. So we see a lot of times people will have a diastasis recti, which is an ab separation, or they'll create a pelvic organ prolapse. And it didn't even happen in early postpartum and it wasn't there at birth. But this stuff happens a lot of times at like the 6 and 7 month mark. And that is because you know, we want to get our bodies back, but our bodies weren't quite ready for our activities that we felt would get our bodies back. So, you know, it's a price to pay and it's important to think about and just recognize, and it's okay to have these thoughts. I just want to give you another way to think like, okay, I'm helping my body by doing this pelvic floor stuff. When I saw Dr. Victoria on Monday, it was like, okay, this is better than any workout I could be doing right now. And it's so true, just to really help restore the core. So my little soapbox there. So these are some common issues that we see postpartum. So we help people recover after a C-section. We help people recover from any tearing in the perineum. So when the baby comes out of the vagina, sometimes there's a tear. So any type of tearing will cause scar tissue, and that limits the ability of the pelvic floor to contract and relax. So you need a strong pelvic floor to contract and relax in order to be continent, in order to have pain-free intercourse, all that stuff. So scar tissues and even micro tears. So if you didn't tear, but just the overstretching of the pelvic floor and the vagina to get the baby out can cause limitations in the actual pelvic floor and the core strength. So low back pain is common, achy hips, knee pain, stiff necks, difficulty with sex, painful sex, difficulty with orgasms, trouble holding pee and poop, constipation, and pelvic organ prolapse. I briefly mentioned diastasis. That's a common one we see. That's in the picture over here. This is all the places that you can have a diastasis. what that means is it's just a stretching of the linea alba, it's called, which is that fascia between the two six-pack ab muscles, your rectus abdominis. And you can have a separation at different points. And I will tell you, you can, in my book, I have a self-check of how to self-check yourself. And we're happy to teach you that at any point if you're interested. But I totally missed my own diastasis this time. And Dr. Victoria caught it on Monday. And I was like, can you double check that, triple check that? Because I didn't feel that myself. And, but sometimes like, that's just why it's really important to have a professional help you. And a pelvic expert physical therapist is really the person that will help guide you in that way. You'll get cleared by midwives and they might actually not feel it. Your OB or midwife or whoever your provider is, it might not even be present, or they might not feel it simply because it might occur later on. So someone might say, this wasn't present at my 6-week mark or my 6-week final checkup, but it was there at my, and then you found this at 3 months. Why is that happening? And it can simply just be like our body mechanics and how we're moving and or the exercises that we choose to go back to. So just some side notes there. And then this picture below is called is a picture of a pelvic organ prolapse. Hopefully you can see my little arrow. Wish I had a big arrow, but you can see the vagina right here. And this is the bladder in front. And a lot of times, during pregnancy and postpartum, you'll get what's called pelvic organ prolapse. So it's a descent of these organs. So they'll encroach in on the vaginal canal. So sometimes you might feel like you have a tampon in, or you feel some pelvic pressure, or you feel like something's falling out of your body. That can be your bladder, it can be your uterus, or it can be your rectum. And it sounds scary, but it's actually like, in pretty much everyone we assess postpartum, there is some descent of the organs. And as long as you know how to heal and do the right exercises, you can get those to kind of go back up into their places. I've had a pelvic organ prolapse since before I even had kids. And it's the same exact grade that it was, according to Dr. Victoria on Monday, that it was from even before I had kids. So as long as you know how to manage this stuff, you can stay very functional, and it's not scary, but it might feel scary, but there's a million things you can do. And it's just really important to draw attention to it, because like I said, excuse me, most people we evaluate postpartum have some of that descent of their pelvic organs. And so just knowing that that's there and not going 3 years, 10 years with it being there and not knowing like the right things to do to help it go back up can save you, peeing your pants. It can save you a lifetime of achy joints and all that stuff. Some common issues that I'm just going to take a sip here. Some common issues that we also see postpartum, especially initially, is that like arthritic pain, or feeling like when you first step on the ground in the morning, it's like that just achiness in your bones. That's really common postpartum. If that's the case, you want to rule out RA, but a pelvic therapist can help you kind of navigate how to warm your body up to be able to prevent the pain associated with that. Cool. Oh, and just a side note, a couple of the questionnaires that we got back were from people that one person had their baby the exact same day that Jayla, my baby, was born, July 29th. So that was fun to read. And then a lot of people had questions. It was pretty much consistently, there was pain in the tailbone and pain in the sacrum. And those were some really common pain points that people were experiencing. And so I'll touch on that a little bit too. And funny, that was exactly what I was experiencing after this delivery as well. So we'll talk a little bit about healing that and what that looks like. And then another common thing was just the prevention of a lot of the pelvic organ prolapse or incontinence later in life. And so that's really what this is all about. All right. So the root cause of all these common issues is really the lack of core strength and just the change in core strength that happens. So your core is on the next page. The core is like this force absorber. We can think about it as a slinky or a spring that every time your foot hits the ground, it's like the shock absorber that absorbs the forces. And so when your foot hits the ground, the core, the muscles do the work to absorb that force, so your joints don't have to, so your organs don't have to. And so that's what you need the core for. I like to show the core as a pop can. This is an example from Mary Massery, and it is, the core is 4 sides to it. So the diaphragm is this muscle here. Then you have your abdominal wall that's on the front. And then you have your pelvic floor, which is on the bottom. Then you have some back and butt muscles, which is on the back. So all of these change even during pregnancy, they get stretched out. And then after pregnancy, they're just expected to go back together. And that doesn't always happen quickly and in the right way. And sometimes if we have a C-section or if you have any tearing, you might have scar tissue that these muscles just can't function because they're not taught to refunction. So that's something that you have to teach once you work out the scar tissue, is teach these muscles how to work again. And because they don't just automatically turn on. What happens is the body will compensate, and the body is beautiful at compensating for 5, 10, 15 years. But then after that, eventually that'll catch up and those compensations will, I say, wear out. And then that's when we start to get pain, or maybe that's when you start peeing your pants, or, different things like that happen. So I say it as a pop can because what creates like really good core strength is the pressure inside of the pop can. And having a child or being pregnant, you can imagine that the core doesn't function as well. So the pressure changes. So if you pop the top to a pop can, you can just easily squish that pop can. So, excuse me, I have a tickle. Yeah. All right. Thank you. So if you think about like you popping the top of a can that is popped open, you can easily squish. That's because the pressure is released. So we have to rebuild our core to rebuild that pressure system to, number 1, keep our organs inside, and number 2, to be that shock absorber so our joints don't take the heat. So that's kind of the goal of rebuilding postpartum. So I've talked about the pelvic floor a little bit, and the pelvic floor is consistent of 3 layers of muscles. So all of these muscles are important, and just treating one layer of muscles, a lot of pelvic physical therapists will just, kind of look at this muscle and maybe stick electrodes on it and tell it to move it, tell you to Kegel or tell you to relax. And that's not treating the entire muscle. So really a good pelvic floor exam looks like having someone look at all 3 layers of these muscles. So the muscles contain 3 holes. So there's the rectum where we poop out of. We have the vagina for intercourse and childbirth. And then we have the urethra for urination, and the clitoris is also important. And so you want to check all of these muscles. And we do that through an intravaginal exam, and we'll like deeply dissect all layers. And you can do this on yourself as well, but it does take some skill and is a little tricky. And I will tell you that Dr. Victoria found things on me on Monday that I was like, I didn't even know. It was feeling so good during pregnancy, and now this. So it's really important that all 3 of these layers work together, because they are the bottom of the core. They're the ones holding everything in. They hold our organs in. They allow relaxation for bowel movements. They allow relaxations for peeing and for intercourse and for orgasm. So just really important here. Any questions on the pelvic floor or the core? Does that make sense? Hopefully. Feel free to drop anything in the chat while I soothe my throat. A couple people that responded to the email, said that they were pregnant still and just excited to start doing this postpartum. And one thing that is really important and crucial is the more you do during pregnancy, so if you do some pelvic floor work during pregnancy, the recovery is 10 times easier. And I like to say that, I'm going to back up, not necessarily easier, but a lot quicker. And the reason that is because if you think about, if you have a hamstring of an elite athlete and that muscle is really hydrated with good blood flow, it's really strong and coordinated, and you tear that hamstring, that athlete can just kind of rebuild that up and bulk it back up and get some good therapy on it, and it heals pretty quickly. Now, if that's your pelvic floor and it's same thing, it'll heal pretty quickly postpartum, even if you have a tear. Now, if you have a hamstring that's totally flaccid and not strong, and then you tear it and it's never really had the blood flow, it never had the coordination, it's really hard to rebuild that muscle. And so that's why I say, like, the more you do during pregnancy to really help open up your pelvic floor, give your pelvic floor blood flow, the easier it is to recover postpartum. And so we love for people to start there, and it will help if you plan to have another delivery. It will help significantly help the baby descend into the pelvis, and also with pushing times. Most of our clients have very short pushing times, even first time moms will have 15 to 45-minute pushing times. And that's just because their pelvic floors are so open that the uterus can actually do the work of the pushing. So that was my little tangent, but this is an anatomy review. And so this is just, this is your core. So again, that picture of your core from the side, and then we have the pelvic floor and then the butt muscles. So all things core. So this is to Kegel or not to Kegel. And I will tell you that every single time, we always tell new moms and birthing people that you don't want to start with Kegels. And it's really important not to be Kegling from the beginning. And the reason is because the pelvic floor is already going to be contracting to pull the bones back together to try and get your body to come back together. And so that's tightening of the pelvic floor. There's no need to do any more tightening of that. And so in order to help get yourself to a point that you want to Kegel, and we don't teach Kegeling as doing just Kegels and squeezing your pelvic floor 15 times or 100 times a day, which is what some of the old research says. You really want to integrate your entire core together and get that moving so you can lift your baby up or deadlift, whatever you want to be doing, but so all your muscles and your core work together, and you don't have to be just isolating any certain group. So and then that's what this is. So we want to really teach these muscles to work in the full range of motion during activity. Cool. So proper steps to healing is step 1 is really identifying the scar tissue in the belly and in the pelvis. So that'd be inside the pelvic floor and across the abdominal wall. If you go onto our Instagram, you'll see some of my session and what that looks like, for me on Monday. And then we heal those structures through manual release. Then we retrain the body, and then we start to rebuild it. So retraining is telling the muscles when to work. So if I'm going to stand up from sitting, I want my muscles to be working appropriately, so nothing's falling out of my body. And let me take a sip here. Good time to get a tickle, that's for sure. And then we want to start to rebuild that. So bulk it up, make it stronger, make it so I can do that 100 times without any descent of my organs. Then we get to a point where you maintain your core strength. And really that's a lifetime thing. So making sure our pelvic floor is good, especially before we go into menopause. The reason before we go into menopause is because we're going to get a big hormonal shift, and that will change our core strength and change our lubrication and our hormones. And we want to make sure that everything is in the best possible condition before we go through that huge event of menopause, and through premenopause too. So if you have incontinence before menopause, treat it before menopause 100%, because it's easier than once you're past menopause. It's still definitely 100% possible, just not as favorable. Takes a little bit longer. So, and then anytime you start training for something new, maybe it's a new childbirth, or maybe it is a marathon, you want to always be keeping your core tuned up to whatever body changes are happening for you. So the way to start working your core is to start with your diaphragm. So the diaphragm is the muscle. I'm going to stand up here. I'm doing this in the baby room here. we took this baby room away from my son and had my son and daughter room share with the older kids, the 6 and 4-year-old. And that was a mistake. So we're turning this back into his room. And we'll find a place for the baby at some point when she's out of our room. Just a little side note. Okay, so some how to contract your diaphragm and get your diaphragm going. And so the diaphragm is that top piece of the core, it's the top piece of the pop can. So when this muscle contracts, it goes down into your belly. So you can see me here. So if I have a hand on my belly and a hand on my chest, if I take a deep breath into my belly, you will see my hand on my belly rise and let it go. And same thing, inhale into belly and let it go. So, and I'm not letting the hand on my chest rise yet. So we can get there, but for now, just to start re-educating your diaphragm, that's the kind of breath you want to be doing. Your ribs flare during pregnancy as the baby grows. So does your ab muscles. And when that happens, the diaphragm flare gets longer and then it becomes less efficient. So it's not as strong. So in order to get that diaphragm, the strength back and to help the ribs start coming back down, you want to do this belly breathing to really restore some of that piece of the core. So that's what I would start with, 5 minutes a day. And, do that 5 minutes a day, every day. It's good for relaxation too. I did an Instagram live last week or 2 weeks ago, and we talked about doing some contraction and inhalation. And so you can play with that too. You can go check that out. But you should also work with a pelvic expert PT because they might change some of the breath work for you, depending on if you have a diastasis or if you have a pelvic organ prolapse. You don't want to be forcing this breath and like really pushing everything out. You want this to be just a natural movement. So that breath pattern is what leads me into having a healthy bowel movement. So bowel movements are tricky postpartum because what happens when you grow a baby, I'm gonna just keep playing with this, is the colon. So your colon is here. Okay, this is your colon, your large intestine. Okay, when you grow a baby, that gets pushed out to the side. So constipation is really, really common. Anal fissures and hemorrhoids, really common, all because this system got changed and the colon is now pushed out to the side and slammed up high. And so we want to start restoring that normal motility of the colon. But that's one of the reasons that makes it hard for us to have a bowel movement postpartum, is because just the positioning itself and not having our core strength and that pressure that's normally there for us. So yes, your midwife or your OB or provider might prescribe vitamin C, magnesium, a stool softener, a laxative, some kind of stimulant to keep your bowels going. And it is important to make sure the consistency is smooth and soft. And so, whatever you have to do in the beginning to get that is really important, because you don't want to, after you have a baby, especially a vaginal delivery, you don't want to be straining. But this goes for C-section too, because your organs are heavier and any straining is going to push them down. So you want to make sure that you're not pushing your stool out and you're not doing that. There's a lot of stuff that we do in the clinic to help with this initial constipation. So this is when we will see people early postpartum within 5 days to a week to 2 weeks, is just to help manage that constipation and start to really get the colon to go back into the right position. We do that through colon massages and what's called visceral manipulation to move the organs in the way that they should be moving. So all that to say, this is how you want to initiate having your healthy bowel movement. So here's my chair here. Okay, so in this position, pretend I'm on a toilet, you're going to lean forward. When you lean forward, that is going to straighten the chute of it's called the anorectal angle. So it just helps the poop come out easier, so it doesn't have to go around the bend anymore. So you lean forward and you're going to take 3 diaphragmatic breaths. So that belly breath, you're going to go 1, 2, and 3. And on the third one, at the very top of the inhale, you're going to inhale. At the top of the inhale, you're going to gently bear down like you're trying to fart, or like you're trying to fart, but you don't want anyone to see you. And really, I want your stool to be in such a position that you don't actually have to bear down. Like it just kind of happens naturally. With that breath, you get that, you help the colon, give you natural peristalsis to evacuate the stool. And so you want your stool to be at such a good consistency that you can just breathe the poop out. This is how we train childbirth too. We want our pelvic floor to be at such a amazing opening position that with our inhales, the baby can just slide right out, and very little pushing is having to be done. So any questions on this? I'm looking at the chat. I don't see anything. Please let me know if you have questions on this. So it's 3 inhales and gently bearing down on the top of the 3rd inhale. So as moms, even if you're like breastfeeding while you're having a bowel movement, because I've done that too, but maybe not you, and you are in, whatever, like you just want to rush and get it over with, no matter what, just like take your time, teach your kids how to poop like this. We just don't want to be pushing and straining, because it will cause, things like the hemorrhoids and pelvic organ prolapse. And these are just things that we really, really, really want to like help avoid. Cool. Okay. Some exercises to start postpartum. We talked about the breathing. There's a couple stretches that we recommend. These are all, oh no. Oh, good, that worked. Those are all in my book. And so if you want like the exact like where to start with these stretches and strengthening, we will definitely send you a book for free. If you just want to email Isabel, if you want to drop the link in for your email or whatever link you want to put there so people can request the book, we will send that to whoever wants one. And this will just give you a good starting basis. This program, the exercise program, is in the back of the book. And it's all safe things to do even before that 6-week mark. So, all right, body mechanics for navigating a newborn. So obviously, babies get heavy over time, and car seats are really, really heavy and hard on the body. And I didn't even bring my car seat up here, but I should have. And so we're going to start with breastfeeding, and we'll just talk about a couple things for breastfeeding. I was hoping to have a lactation consultant on here with me, but she couldn't make it. So always a good idea to get in touch with a lactation consultant if you're having any trouble getting milk or like feeding the baby. But some things to help improve your experience feeding the baby is things like pillows, which I'm sure most of you are at that point, you would know, but the more pillows, the better. There's nothing in the world that you don't want to be. I know people think like you might want to be like really erect and have amazing posture like as you're feeding your baby, but that's not feasible. And there's no way that your breast tissue can be relaxed in order to feed your baby in that way. So you just want to be supported by pillows in a way that does not feel strenuous to your body, and that your baby is also supported. So it takes very little hand contact. And maybe you get to a point that you don't even like, you can be hands-free with your baby once they're a little bit older, but you just want to be extremely supportive with pillows. And that's what I'm going to leave that as. Our lactation consultant that was going to come on, she was preparing tips for us, and we'll send those out to you guys. We'll send those out another time via email. But okay, so some movement with baby. One thing that you should always do, and this is from day 1 postpartum, is to start, we call it blow as you go. So every time that you pick up your baby from, like, say the ground or even the crib or the bassinet, you want to blow as you lift up. So let's pretend I have my baby down here and I'm coming up here. You want to exhale as you lift up. So I'm here and I'm gonna exhale to lift my baby up. So this goes for anything strenuous that you're doing. whether you're rolling over in bed, even though that might not sound strenuous, that's how you want to make sure that's how you're still getting out of bed, even postpartum, until you are super duper strong, just to not be crunching up out of bed. And if you're crunching up out of bed, you're still going to put yourself at a disposal of getting an ab separation, and you could still like be pushing the organs down and out. So any getting out of bed, you want to roll to your side and then get up. And as you roll, you're going to still do that exhale, the shh as you go. One thing that is just crossing my mind that I didn't tell you guys, a really important reason that you want to not be doing Kegels for is when you do contract your pelvic floor. I'm the side noting here because I distracted myself that I forgot. So when you do contract your pelvic floor, you essentially want to be like pulling things up and in. Well, initially, when you don't know where your pelvic organs are, or if you just had a baby and they're heavier and the pelvic organs are below the pelvic floor, when you squeeze your pelvic floor in Kegel, that could be pushing them out further. And so that's why the Kegels aren't the great option to start with. And a lot of times that what we teach is called the transverse abdominis contraction. And so that's where I'm going to teach this. I'm sorry, I'm backtracking. It's just important when we talk about movement. And, you know, I'm still postpartum, so my brain is just not quite recovered. And so TA is this muscle, that abdominal wall muscle on the front, not the six-pack ab muscle. And so if you think about your hip bone here and your hip bone here, this muscle, as it contracts, contracts this way and lifts up a bit. So it actually has a lifting effect on the pelvic organs. And so this is the muscle that is really good to start contracting. So when I squeeze it, you probably won't see it too much, but there's just not much movement. It will come together and it will elevate. As I squeeze it, one way to initiate the squeeze is by doing a sh sound, an SH sound. So if I go ahead and contract, I shh, I'll feel this come together and lift up. As you start to do that movement, you do want to make sure that you're not Kegling. So if you're early postpartum, your pelvic floor physical therapist will also like say what's right for your body at this time. But initially postpartum, this is what you want to make sure you're doing. As you contract in TA, you want to almost think about now connect to your pelvic floor. Think about flaring your anus open or your labia open so you're not contracting down there too. So that is just the initial start of the process before you get to, you know, doing Kegels or contracting your pelvic floor and tying the rest of that core together. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So the movement with the baby is really making sure you exhale as you lift or do any kind of movement with exertion. And then the getting in and out of the bed is a main thing that we see people like get injuries with even postpartum. And that's just like avoid the crunch, make sure that you're rolling over. So you're not, you know, putting yourself at that, like giving yourself an ab separation or pelvic organ prolapse. And then getting into and out of the car with the baby when you know, have the infant seat. Oh man, I don't want to say this wrong because now I'm having second thoughts, but from a physical therapy perspective and from your body perspective, we like the car seat to be in the closest position to you. So it's not in the middle seat. But now that I'm thinking about it, I know if it's your first, you probably have it in the middle seat because that's, I think, considered the safest in the car manuals and the car seat manuals. But from a physical therapy perspective, we always say like keep the car seats as much as you can as close to your body. So even if that means that you have to get in the car with the car seat, so you're not like having to reach far away. So you want to keep it as close as humanly possible to your body and use a carrier, use a stroller, try not to lug that car seat around, but man, is that ever hard, especially if you have a sleeping baby, right? So, all right, cool. So that's what I have for you guys. If you have questions, please let me know. Yeah, I would love to answer any questions that you have. If anyone has any. I'm taking a little photo of my slide here. I should have done that because all I can see is me, not any participants or anything. Cool. Any questions? These are the references. Happy to answer anything. Thank you for being here. So great to see you, Caitlin. I got your text about a coffee date and I'm in. I just have to figure it out. I hope you guys are good. Nice to meet you all.